Good evening, Chicago. Wow, thanks for coming out tonight. What a crowd. Welcome to Crime Adjacent Live. Before we get started, I need to tell you something important. Like I said last week, in Detroit, Nikki has been hot in the pursuit of the zip tie killer. We got a tip a few weeks ago, and I can finally say more. Nikki is in New Hampshire, working with the Lebanon police there because this tip, it turns out, was correct. He had assumed yet another identity of yet another police officer, this time in the small town just south of Dartmouth College. He has, since this tip and since Nikki arrived, slipped away, just as he has many times before. But, and here's where the crime-adjacent community comes in, if anyone has any information or weird run-ins in this area about an officer who is calling himself Frank Smith, I know, completely plain, that's his M.O., who said he was originally from Boston but is absolutely not from Boston, please call into the police tip line or reach out to us. But that's it, just tips. Remember, do not approach this guy. Send any info to Nikki and let her, a pro, a former detective, let her take care of it. Our search continues for the man who killed our mother, Susan, the whole reason we started this podcast in the first place, and now here we are tonight with you. Like so many families, we are still searching for answers and justice. We will catch this guy. Nikki will catch this guy with your help. Thank you. Okay, I'll update when I can. But for now, let's get into tonight's case and a question we may have all pondered at some point. How do you commit the perfect murder in this age of omnipresent digital surveillance? As always, every detail matters to profile and solve this case because the suspect almost got away with the perfect murder. On Thursday, October 14th, 2021, at exactly 10:32 p.m., elementary school teacher Lauren McCarthy, age 32, was jogging along the Bayou Creek Greenway behind the Magnolia Creek Estates in Mobile, Alabama, wondering what she was doing if she hadn't made a horrible miscalculation. Ordinarily, Lauren jogged in the morning very early when there were crowds of joggers like herself or people coming and going to work. It felt safer then. This was a safe neighborhood, very little crime, a lovely pathway, nice homes. At the same time, Lauren had been harassed by men, many times, especially at night. Despite being a safe place overall, she couldn't escape these catcalls and harassment, and one time, a man followed close behind her, not smiling, not saying anything, just keeping pace and staring at her. And this was in the middle of the day, so she felt doubly uncomfortable jogging at night because who knows which man was hiding where, waiting for her. And also, she knew all the statistics when it comes to being a woman, simply jogging alone. Not to nerd out too much here, but I've seen studies and papers showing anywhere from 50 to 75% of girls and women runners reporting street harassment from men. And one study from Adidas shows that 90% of women are at least concerned about safety while running because of all these creepy men. And longtime listeners of Crime Adjacent remember, we have covered the cases of runners Molly Tibbetts, Karina Vetrano, and so many others, too many others, on previous episodes. So Lauren, who loves running and has competed in several marathons, told the Mobile Dispatch later that she was just fed up that night. Why should her use of public space be limited by all these creepy, threatening men? She said, quote, "It burns my ass when people talk about supposed third world countries where women's rights are limited, when here I am having to pick and choose when I can simply leave my house." She asked, what sort of city or country does she actually live in if she has to lock herself away at night, frightened to simply exist outside? No, she told the dispatch, she was done with it all that night. She'd had enough. That morning, Thursday, she didn't get to do her usual run. She had a shitty day at school and then endless reams of homework after school and just needed a release to get out there, to run. So she did. Lauren told the dispatch, "I was just tired of being afraid." So Lauren slipped on her Hokas and a running belt and then left her house on Rose Cliff Circle at 10 p.m. This was all recorded on her Strava running app. She did her usual route along the pathway, which circles the entire Magnolia Estates neighborhood, a 3-mile loop of flat pavement that connects with other neighborhoods as well. It was a perfect night, Lauren said. Calm, Cool, a half moon casting just enough light to not need her headlamp. She didn't wear headphones as usual because she was still wary of being alone out there at night, and who knows which man was where at the same time. But soon, all those good running chemicals kicked in. Her pace was great. Her legs were feeling good. I was in heaven, she told the newspaper. But as she approached a part of the path that connects Magnolia Estates neighborhood to the Moss Creek neighborhood, she began to see something flashing on the path in front of her. It wasn't a light. It was something reflecting light, a figure, a person. She thinks it's someone riding a bike, slowly, coming towards her, maybe not. And why is this person glowing? Lauren actually stopped at this point on the asphalt pathway. This is precisely 10:32 p.m., according to our Strava app, which recorded the interruption. Lauren strained her neck to see in front of her. There was no one else around, no one except her and whoever this was on a bike, coming toward her. Because she could see now, most definitely, this was a person on a bike, a large person, and they weren't glowing. They were naked. She could hardly believe it. The glow she saw coming off this figure was the half moonlight reflecting off the palest, smoothest, perhaps even greasy, wet skin like sunlight on an enormous white manatee, coming right at her. Lauren told the dispatch in a quote that the newspaper edited, "My first thought was WTF, and then my second was to hide." Lauren said she immediately reconsidered her plans to run at night and thought she needed to get off this path. Fast. Whatever the hell this naked man on a bicycle was doing that night, she wanted no part of it. So Lauren quickly sidesteps off the path, finds one of the magnolia trees this section is named after, and hides behind its large trunk, hoping this man riding towards her hadn't seen her, wouldn't stop. And so she waits and watches and waits and watches, and this man on a bicycle pedals past her, seemingly lost in thought, just slowly chugging along down the path. Lauren told the police later she didn't get the best look at him. She was hiding, trying to control her breath and not draw any attention to herself behind the tree. But she is positive, no doubt, that this man was large enough that the first thought that entered her mind was slick, land-bound manatee. That's what she said. And he was completely bald, seemingly wet as if he had been working out, sweating. And he was, without a doubt, naked. Well, except for all these patches of tape all over. His knees, arms, back, shoulders. Lauren herself had worn KT tape and wondered if that was it. Tape to help keep this man's joints in place. Runners do it all the time. And so the guy on the bike pedals past the tree. Lauren peeks around the trunk, watching him go. No clothes, tape all over. What was happening? Lauren just watched, hidden, afraid to move or rejoin the path. Finally, when the man gets far enough away, when she thinks the coast is clear, Lauren gets back on the path and absolutely beats it home, like, I am out of here. She follows the path in a loop towards her house, hoping she doesn't encounter this large, wet, slippery, naked manatee of a man on a bike and whatever the hell he was up to that night. No, thank you, she said. It wasn't until Lauren called police, a few days later, for a different reason altogether, that Lauren would realize she had spotted not just some weird naked man on a bike in the middle of the night. She had observed the one tiny flaw in one person's plan for the perfect murder. Okay, profilers, let's dive straight into this case, because you won't believe what happens next. Live from Chicago, I'm Chase Patrick, and this is Crime Adjacent. On Friday morning, October 15th, 2021, 43-year-old David Keller doesn't show up for an important meeting at 9 a.m. at his home building construction firm in Mobile, Alabama. David's business partner, Michael Macario, is waiting in a conference room with an important client, a developer Michael and David had been trying to team up with to build more houses in and around the areas of Mobile. And if this had happened a year ago, if David had not shown up to this meeting, Michael says he would have stopped things right away and called police immediately because David was about the finest, most upstanding business partner you could ask for. There was a reason Michael wanted to go into business with David in the first place about 5 years ago, in 2016. David was dependable, hardworking, really had his stuff together, and just knew this industry and this area like the back of his hand. But that morning, the 15th, while Michael was in the conference room of their shared office space, and while he's making small talk and stalling and waiting for David to appear, Michael is also thinking, not again. What is David's deal? How could he blow this big, important meeting like this? Because over the past year, in the past 6 months in particular, David had fallen on some really hard times, as Michael put it politely. David began drinking. A lot. He was late all the time. He was in the middle of a divorce. His wife of 13 years separated from him a month ago and had been seeing another man. David had been missing work and blowing off jobs and even started to ask Michael for money, loans from their shared business accounts. It was getting bad, and so Michael's sitting there in the conference room, and this new client is getting antsy, and so Michael just continues without David, wondering if or when David might come in and whether David might be drunk when he does. Perhaps this is all for the best, that David misses this meeting, Michael is thinking. And according to Michael, the meeting ends at 10 a.m., and there's still no David. So Michael starts calling and texting David, and there's no response. By 11 a.m., he calls again, and there's still no response. Michael told police, "To be honest, I was more mad than concerned. We had big jobs across town that I couldn't get to, and David was supposed to be there. So I needed to know right away whether I should cancel all my appointments to cover for David." So finally, at about 12:15 p.m., Michael gets in his big red company pickup truck and heads over to the Magnolia Estates neighborhood where David lives. And when he arrives at David's house on Rosecliff Circle, Michael sees that David's big red business pickup, just like Michael's, is parked in the driveway. Here is exactly what Michael later told police detectives that afternoon. Michael stomps up to the door, sort of pissed. Clearly David is sleeping off a hangover yet again at home while Michael is out here trying to keep the business alive. Michael gets to the door, raises a fist to pound on it, and stops. The door is open. Just a crack, but it's noticeable. Michael said he called out for David, received no answer, and then reached out with his palm to push open the door. He peeks inside, and there's David, his one-time friend and business partner. David is in the foyer. He had clearly been shot, as far as Michael could tell anyway. One wound in the face, in the forehead basically, and some amount of damage and blood in his chest area. There's blood on David, on the tile, sprayed throughout the room. Michael said, "It looked bad. I didn't know what to do. I rushed inside, looked for a phone, and called police straight away." "Why didn't you use your cell phone?" police asked him. Michael shrugged. "I don't know. I just didn't. My friend had just been killed, and I was sort of in shock, I guess." So Michael finally finds a phone in the kitchen, calls 911, and says his friend David Keller of Rosecliff Circle in the Magnolia Estates neighborhood had just been shot. This 911 call registers at 12:27 p.m. that afternoon, Friday the 15th. The dispatcher asks if Michael can perform CPR, and Michael looks at David, and he was basically saying, "I'm happy to. Please don't get me wrong, but I'm not a medical expert. I think David is dead." Rigor mortis had already set in. David appeared stiff, and when Michael reached out to touch him, his chest, he felt stiff to the touch, and the blood was dried and sticky. Michael told the dispatcher it was no use. David was clearly gone. There was blood everywhere, and his friend appeared to be lying there, not breathing, in the foyer for quite some time. This is the start of the investigation. The lead investigator who catches this case is Detective Jennifer Jen Holloway with the Mobile Police Department. She later told the Dispatch newspaper, much later when they needed the media's help, this looked like a hit on first glance. Not like a professional hitman, but more like a measured, purposeful killing. Let's get into this first, the crime scene and the body, because it told Holloway so much and really was the starting point for this investigation, all the clues Holloway discovered that afternoon. Here's what Holloway later testified to in court, according to the transcripts. David had been shot 3 times total, once in the head, basically dead on in the forehead right above the eyes. Then he had fallen to the ground. 2 more shots registered into his midsection, coming from the side and entering his chest. As Holloway put it, movies and real life are very much different. In the movies, people who are shot like this sort of fly backwards and land on their backs. But with shots like this to the forehead, David slumped to the ground in a pile, like a Jenga tower collapsing on itself. Because of this, because he was sort of slumped, he was then shot on the side, in the chest area still, but not quite square in the middle of the chest, because he didn't fly back and fall face up. The autopsy later that day noted rigor mortis, lividity, or pooling on the side of his body that was in contact with the ground, and ultimately came to the conclusion that yes, indeed, David had been shot 3 times and the manner of death was homicide. The autopsy put the time of death the previous night, sometime after dinner, as he had some amount of undigested hot dog in his stomach. Combined with his body condition, the food and temperature of his internal organs, and the weather that night inside and outside the house, the medical examiner thinks sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight, roughly. For Detective Holloway, in the foyer that Friday afternoon, the cause of death looked obvious. She didn't need a medical examiner to see the gunfire wounds and the amount of blood and the light stippling around the forehead. She had seen this before. Not a lot, but enough. So the first thing Holloway is looking for that afternoon, she testified in court, was the shell casings. She wasn't sure just yet what type of gun had been used, but she suspected a 9mm, which would have ejected spent shells. She hoped there might be a fingerprint on one of them, or at least enough solid material to trace the weapon. But there were no shells. That was the first red flag. Someone had cleaned this crime scene. This is part of the reason why Holloway thought this was a targeted hit in some way. Again, not professional movie hitmen, but intentional. Not like a fight that got out of hand, she testified. Holloway saw that the foyer table on the wall next to the door was still there, a nice little ceramic bowl on it with David's keys and his wallet. It all looked undisturbed. All this shouted fast, clean, no argument. Holloway testified that someone came to kill David that night. How does she know? Well, David was clearly shot on the forehead the moment he opened the door. His wound, the body placement, the blood spray misting behind him along the tile floor of the foyer, and then the carpet of the living room just behind him. To Holloway, this all told her David opened the door for someone, and that someone had a gun pointed at his head, close enough to leave stippling or gunfire residue on his forehead. So this killer shot David in the forehead, walked into the foyer, and fired 2 more shots into David while he was on the ground. Overkill, for sure. He was already gone from the forehead shot, Holloway testified, no doubt. But someone really, really wanted to make sure of it. That's the easy part, the obvious part. The rest of the scene is more complicated, made more so by Michael Macario in his actions that morning, Holloway testified. For starters, as Michael was the one who found David, his fingerprints and boot prints were everywhere. In the foyer, in the kitchen, Michael told Holloway that he initially went to the bedroom where he knew David kept his office. He thought that's where his phone would be. Holloway testified this didn't throw off the investigation. This can be expected in times like this. A helpful friend or family member just trying to do the right thing. It happens. But Michael's actions certainly contaminated the crime scene. And so Holloway had to take his prints and boot prints to rule out those prints against any other suspect. No problem, just added work, a pain, but part of the deal, Holloway said. Like I said, Holloway thinks she has an idea of what happened. David opens the door, he's shot, and then shot again just to be sure. What she found throughout the rest of the house really sealed the deal. This was an intentional attack on David, no doubt. Holloway walks in, past the foyer, and notes that David has a neat, tidy, well-decorated house. It's quite nice. There's a big screen TV, a big stereo system, nice couches, chairs, a coffee table books. No fancy art or anything, but just a lot of nice stuff. And it's still all there. The TV, the stereo, the wallet by the door, and the fancy ceramic bowl. No one killed David to rob him and pawn his nice stuff. All of this was untouched and neat and orderly, really put together. Which is why his desk in his bedroom stood out. The drawers were all open, papers on the floor, things tossed here and there. Same with his closet, clothes tossed onto the floor, a baseball bat halfway in and out of the door. The kitchen, too, drawers and cabinets open, but no mess from cooking. All the plates and even his iron stovetop grill were all washed and on the counter, neat and orderly. David had clearly had dinner, washed up, got his place back in pristine condition before having a drink of rye, which was still in a cut crystal glass on the coffee table in the living room. David was clearly neat and tidy, so his desk, the closet, the kitchen cabinets told Holloway something important. Profilers, I'm sure you've guessed by now. Whoever killed David was clearly looking for something. What? Holloway had no idea. Cash, stamps, coins, baseball cards, who knows?
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Aside from Michael's fingerprints and boot prints, and obviously David's, and even old fibers and prints from his ex-wife, this whole crime scene was pristine. No prints, no shell casings, no fibers, no DNA left behind. There was a bit of latex residue on his desk, leaving Holloway to conclude the killer wore gloves, as there were no latex gloves found anywhere in the house. Okay, I know this is a lot about the crime scene, but as Holloway testified, it told her so much. This was a purposeful killing of a specific individual by someone who then went around looking very purposefully for something they knew David had hidden, somewhere important. This all points to the fact that someone knew David had something important squirreled away, which also points to the fact that this someone knew David. This wasn't a stranger attack, Holloway told the court. David knew his killer, and then the killer wanted him dead, and they wanted something important from him. So knowing all this, Holloway first had to dig into David and who he was to understand who might have wanted to do this, which we'll get into soon enough, because, wow, there were a lot of people. David Michael Keller, age 43, was born in Mobile. Single child, mother and father have since passed. David wasn't the best student growing up, but he did okay. His father owned a roofing company, and David always knew he'd take it over someday. He wanted to take it over. He liked it. So school and keeping his act together weren't really top of the list as a child for David. Holloway saw one drunken driving arrest when he was 19, and then one misdemeanor count of assault for a bar fight when he was 21. At 23, things changed. David got his shit together, apparently. He met Veronica Hernandez, married her a year later. She's Veronica Keller now, also 43, and David really dedicated himself to the family roofing business. Veronica was a teacher at Magnolia Elementary, 3rd grade, and David ran the roofing company with his father until both of his parents died in a boating accident in Florida in 2009. David inherited the business and really began to grow it over the next few years after this tragedy. In fact, with Veronica's urging, he started a side business of home development and was proud of his work buying up old abandoned lots for new homes and spec sales. This wasn't huge money, but between Veronica's job and David's roofing and home building, they were doing quite well. Veronica said they tried to have kids a few times, but ultimately gave up. It was too painful. So aside from that and the family tragedy of losing his parents, David and Veronica lived a calm, peaceful, well-to-do lifestyle. They called themselves dinks, dual income, no kids. For Detective Holloway, David was a low-risk victim on first glance. Super nice, safe, middle to upper-class neighborhood, great job, dual income, no gambling or drinking then or drugs or anything remotely illicit. David was on the up and up. He was a member of the Chamber of Commerce and spoke occasionally at events. Nothing screamed risky to Holloway except, I guess, the money in this nice house. Perhaps someone saw a well-to-do businessman around town and thought he'd have money squirreled away somewhere. Holloway said no. Her gut told her this was something else. Someone looking to make a score would have stolen the TV, the stereo, anything they could get their hands on that night, his wallet right there by the front door. So thinking this was a killing by someone David knew, Holloway immediately turned to his friends and even his family, Veronica. And a different story from the well-to-do, put-together David suddenly emerged. This brings us to suspects, because it turns out there were quite a few of them, according to Holloway. For starters, there was his wife, Veronica Keller, as intimate partners, as we know, are often considered first. David and Veronica had been married for 13 years and had been together for many more before that. Things were good for much of this time, until they weren't. Veronica told Detective Holloway that the past 3 years had been difficult, very difficult. In fact, Veronica was more or less done by the time David had been killed. Veronica said there was nothing huge or some big moment like an affair. It's just that they drifted apart year after year. By the time David started a new business, they were more or less roommates, she said. Silent treatments, withdrawing, just a slow, painful slide into needing and wanting different things from each other and not being able to provide them. Veronica suggested couples therapy many times. David said no many times. It went on like this for years. And then the drinking began. And eventually, Veronica had enough. She said, "I felt like I tried, and the only thing left to do was to keep trying at something that was clearly not working, or to just leave." And so she did. In 2021, she moved out into an apartment on a trial separation, as they both agreed. But in Veronica's mind, this was the first step in a divorce. The drinking just got worse and worse. David refused to talk. Work was going downhill. She was done. She tried everything. Hearing all this, Holloway is thinking, is all of this enough to want him dead? Certainly not, Veronica said. No way. She had a steady job, resources of her own, and the ability to just start over. She didn't need any money. David never cheated on her. She wasn't angry, just sad at this point. And besides, she had an alibi for the night in question. About a month prior to David's murder, Veronica had met another man, Jeff Peterson, a fishing boat captain in Mobile. It started as a friendship. His kids used to attend her school, and it sort of grew from there after Veronica moved out of the house. And on the Thursday night in question, Veronica and Jeff had a nice dinner at a bistro downtown and then went back to Jeff's place, where they remained all night. People saw them at the bistro. Holloway tracked this down. There was a receipt. They were there until 10 p.m., happy, chatting, not quite the look of people planning a targeted hit within the hour. Veronica even agreed to hand over her phone for a full, detailed forensic sweep, and it matched her story. 1, she was at the bistro, and then at Jeff's place all night according to phone records and GPS coordinates. 2, the text threads between Veronica and David did indeed tell the story of a marriage pretty much over. Veronica served him with divorce papers a week earlier. David refused to sign. Throughout this evening, his final evening, David was texting Veronica saying they could work on things, go to therapy, start over. This all lined up with Veronica's story, and so there were no red flags here. She was done. She had her own money, an apartment, and was ready to move on. Had even met a nice man and had a vision that her life would be okay without David. She was sad, but also, again, just over it. Holloway asked a hard, sort of intimate and nosy question. You're out and sleeping over at another man's house a month after asking for a separation and a week after asking for a divorce? What gives? Veronica said, you have to remember, she and David had been having trouble for years. She feels like she grieved the end of the relationship a long, long time ago. Moving out was sad, but also the final straw, not the first. She had been done for some time. And this new guy in her life, Jeff Peterson, he refused to allow investigators to access his phone, which did not, in the least, surprise any of his friends. Jeff is a full-blown libertarian amateur constitutional scholar. If police wanted his phone, they needed a warrant. If he said he was at home, he was at home. Besides, they had Veronica's phone and her story. They saw her at his place. Jeff was not a suspect, had never even met David, and they had no probable cause to get a warrant. End of story. Leave him alone or talk to his lawyer. This didn't raise too many red flags, as Holloway was accustomed to people like this, people who knew their rights. It certainly made her job tougher, but again, he had rights and it was perfectly fine to exercise them. But of course, Holloway doesn't stop there. She has a murder to solve. So Holloway tracked down all of Jeff's friends and coworkers who described a man against any and all government intervention. It was his thing. So that all tracked. But they also described a warm, kind, generous, intelligent guy. No way he would do this, they all said. In fact, all his friends said they were happy for him and Veronica. They were both open and in touch with their feelings in a way that David was not, at least from what they'd heard. Veronica and Jeff seemed like a good match to them, and there was just no logical reason why Jeff would want David out of the picture. He already was. Adding to all this was Jeff's timeline that day. Holloway was able to put Jeff at work until 7 p.m. He seemed to be in a good mood, according to his coworkers. He kept talking about a hot date. Indeed, a neighbor saw Jeff come home at 7:30 and then immediately leave again. Bistro employees had him at the restaurant from about 8 to 10 p.m. that night. Then Veronica's phone is at his house. Both said they were there all night, and without getting into details, Veronica didn't leave again until 7 a.m. the following morning for school. So with nothing on Veronica, or Jeff, who just happened to be a new guy in her life, bad timing maybe for all this, Holloway turned to the one person who knew David well. His business partner, the man who found his body, Michael Macario. David and Michael got into business together about 5 years prior, in 2016. It seemed like the perfect union. David was a great home builder with years of experience and lots of connections and on-the-ground know-how. Michael was the money man, better with the books. They made such an odd couple. David, this short, wiry guy, and Michael, this large, tattooed man who was just insanely good at math and accounting. The idea was that they would team up and build a home construction business together, home by home, suburbs, and then bigger developments in the future. They had big plans. And things seemed to be going well, quite well, in fact. Until a year ago, this would be 2020, the height of the COVID pandemic. Holloway talked to their business manager, Janice Bowman, who handled the day-to-day stuff in the office. Bowman said tensions in the office were obvious, but had been growing since a year prior, all having to do with money. Holloway raised an eyebrow. Money was a big component of many murders. She'd solved cases involving just 200. Bowman said there was an ongoing dispute between David and Michael about a missing $5,000. Bowman didn't know the exact details of this $5,000, just that David and Michael argued about it a lot. So Holloway asked Michael. And this dispute honestly seemed difficult to follow. David asked for $5,000 about a year prior to his death. He said it was to buy materials and for networking, social media advertising, and other sort of vague ways to grow the business. Michael said fine, but then couldn't quite figure out what happened with this money. He was in charge of the books and felt like he couldn't get a straight answer from David or the money back. Michael says yes, they argued over this money, frequently, but it was $5,000 in a business pulling in more than $1 million gross a year. He wouldn't kill his friend over this, are you kidding? Michael just needed to make sure the books were square, his part of the whole arrangement. Besides, he said, check my phone, here, do whatever you want. I was home all night with my wife the night David was killed. Holloway did exactly that, and it turns out, yes, Michael's phone was indeed home all night, as was Michael with his wife, Susan, who, coincidentally, worked at the same school as Veronica, David's ex. In fact, Michael said, here, have Susan's phone as well, if that helps. Check them both, check everything. We'll do whatever we can to help solve this. Holloway did, and found they were both telling the truth. Susan played euchre on a phone app from 9:30 to 10 p.m. and then futzed around online for a bit until bedtime around 11. Michael's phone appeared to do the same thing, searching sports scores and game highlights on ESPN until 11 p.m. as well. Their phones pinged off the Wi-Fi and all their Bluetooth devices showed them at home during this time. They were both home and clean, just as Michael had said. But during her investigation, Holloway just couldn't find anyone who had a grudge with David other than, perhaps, Michael, the $5,000. But it didn't add up because honestly, she believed Michael and everything pointed to him being at home. Perhaps David was fighting with someone else, someone Holloway didn't know about yet. She truly had nothing. So Holloway went where detectives go when cases grow cold: the media. Initially, the Mobile Register had done some stories like local man killed in super safe, quiet Magnolia Estate subdivision, and this is out of the ordinary. There was crime, obviously, in Mobile, but this particular place is pretty safe, and it's practically like everyone's got Ring cameras. So these initial stories sort of freak people out, like a murder in a safe neighborhood, and so police stopped commenting, more or less, early in the investigation. Holloway said, with no real leads, we needed to change things up and backtrack to the media at this point to see if anyone saw anything. And sure enough, police soon learned two important things from this new media strategy. One, a neighbor came forward after one story ran in the newspaper to say that he might have heard gunshots. Sort of. Maybe. He read in the paper about the murder, looked back on his Ring camera footage for the night, and found that his dog really began freaking out at 10:45 p.m. exactly on the night David was killed. The neighbor looked at the footage over and over again and couldn't figure out what was happening. Did someone slip onto his property? The dog reacted? No. It was gunshots. On this video footage, you can hear 3 distinct bursts of fire, sort of muffled but definitely loud enough to hear. Pop, a pause, then pop, pop, and then the dog freaks out. This neighbor lives about 3 houses away from David on Rosecliff Circle. You definitely hear gunshots. Maybe. The dog did, but the neighbor did not, even though you can pick up these muffled pops in the footage. So 10:45 p.m., that's how they came up with the exact time of David's death, these timestamps with pops captured on video. That's the first person to come forward. The second person had a much stranger story. Another teacher who works at the exact same school as Susan and Veronica, a woman by the name of Lauren McCarthy, said she was out for a run late at night. And maybe it's nothing or not connected, but it's certainly strange, and who knows, she thought the police should know about this. She called in and told Holloway that she was out jogging on the Magnolia Estates path that night, and she saw something odd. A naked man on a bike covered in some type of KT exercise tape cruising slowly down the path towards her. This was precisely 10:32 p.m., according to her Strava app. There was a pause in her run at that time because Lauren got so freaked out that she jumped and hid behind a tree, hoping the man wouldn't notice her. She described a white, heavy-set man glistening and glowing in half moonlight, just cruising slowly along. Okay, yes, that is strange, Holloway thinks. A naked man at 10:32, heading in the direction of David's place. Weird indeed, but the murderer? So Holloway actually goes back at this point to the neighbor with the Ring camera and asks for more footage, anything with a bike or a naked man between 10:30 and 10:45. And indeed, at 10:36 p.m., there is footage of a man on a bike rolling along the street between this neighbor's house and David's. White man, heavy set, naked, a beach cruiser bike, and yes, some type of tape on him. What gives? There's no way to know if this is connected, of course, but it's odd. A naked man out roughly at the same time of the murder, cruising David's street. So Holloway brings Veronica into the station. Can you ID this guy? The image is not great, and Veronica says she can't. Definitely not Jeff. He's super tall and thin, she says. Lauren, the jogger, she can't ID this guy either. She said she was trying her best to hide and was sort of freaked out. So Holloway brings in Susan, Michael's wife. How about you? Have you seen this guy? And Susan suddenly becomes very, very alert. Noticeably alert. So many cases hinge on evidence. A fingerprint, blood, a bit of DNA left behind, a witness or a video or something. But in Holloway's experience, sometimes cases hinge on this, a noticeable rise or change in a witness during an otherwise casual conversation. Holloway said she noticed Susan's behavior straight away, and it raised red flags. Holloway told the newspaper, this is the definition of a hunch, that internal detective that just gets a feeling. Holloway asked Susan, does this man look familiar? No, Susan says. She doesn't know this guy. No, she certainly wasn't out biking around. She was playing euchre. Michael, too. He was right beside her in bed all night reading up on sports. You can check again. Check their phones. It's all there. Holloway asked, point blank, would Michael kill David over $5,000? And Susan looks up in shock. Not like, how dare you, but more like, are you kidding me? She said, $5,000? David owed us $50,000. This was, obviously, new information to Holloway. David needed money for this, for that, to get back on his feet, to pay for a divorce, to keep the business going. He slowly accumulated loans of $50,000 from the business, and Michael actually had to begin covering some of these expenses with his own money. Yes, Susan said, they were angry and annoyed, but they knew David had fallen on hard times, and whether it's $50,000 or $5,000, they wouldn't kill him. Holloway had seen this before. She knows Susan saw something in that video footage of a man riding a bike. It changed her whole demeanor. And so Holloway keeps pressing. The debt, the money, the naked man on the bike. What was going on? Susan knows something, and if she wants to escape with her freedom, she better come clean. Right now, last chance. And Susan cracks. That's how this case was solved. This interview. According to Susan, who eventually testified to all of this in court, she and Michael planned the perfect murder. On the night in question, Michael completely shaved every inch of his body until it was gleaming white and smooth. Then he applied tape to his tattoos to make sure no one could identify him if they saw him, which they did, obviously. Why naked and why the everything shower? Holloway asked. So he left no fibers or hairs behind or picked up blood or any evidence on his clothes. Then Michael took off his Apple Watch and left his phone behind, on the bed. It would be Susan's job to play euchre and scan the internet with her phone while checking ESPN and sports scores with Michael's. Michael would bike over, do the deed, and then return home, with it appearing, thanks to his phone and watch, that he was home the whole time, with Susan, in bed. Michael never saw the jogger, Lauren. He was too intent on getting to David's house, and he was too intent on keeping a hold of his 9mm Glock pistol in one hand with no pockets to store it in. After passing Lauren, who was hiding behind the tree, he arrived at David's house, collected himself, and knocked on the door. And then, as soon as David opened the door for his good friend and business partner, David must have been confused, to say the least. Why was Michael there so late? Yes, but why was he completely naked and glistening with sweat in the half moonlight? And why was he holding a gun at David's forehead? Michael shot him once, and then again, twice more in the chest after David fell. And then Michael beelined to the desk, in the closet, in the kitchen, hoping to find at least some of the money David owed him. But nothing was there. Susan explained that even if Michael didn't find any money that night, they would at least have full control of the business. That was, in the end, the biggest reason. Control over the company, not $5,000 or even $50,000. They had planned the perfect murder, Susan testified in court. And Michael had the perfect alibi. His wife was home with him, and all his devices were there as well. Were it not for the grainy surveillance footage of a naked man on a bike and a jogger who came forward to tell her story about what a strange sight she saw that night on the trail, they might have indeed gotten away with it. As Holloway said later, criminals aren't the smartest people. There's always something. In this case, it wasn't the physical or digital evidence. They actually did okay with all of that. No, this one was just human. Susan. She couldn't hide her fear of seeing an image of her husband, and it all went downhill from there. She told us everything. Michael was eventually convicted in 2024 and sentenced to life in prison. Susan got 10 years with the possibility of parole, given she ended up being useful to the prosecution of this case. Since then, Veronica and Jeff have moved in together, on his boat. Veronica still teaches at the elementary school, where Lauren also teaches. And it turns out they've become friends, and they've become running buddies on nighttime jogs. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, Chicago. Like I said, Nikki is in New Hampshire, so it's just me again. I'll be in the merch line all night. Please, come say hi. We will see you in Madison next week with another case you simply will not believe. Until next time, I'm Chase Patrick, and this is Crime Adjacent.